We've learned about line weights, but now we want to understand how we can use this knowledge in a manga and anime style to create an authentic, clean, finished drawing. And to help us with this, we have an adventurous manga character here in front of us. And the first thing that we want to take note of when we're talking about clean lines and our general line weighting of these style characters is that the lines are typically very, very thin. You can see across this image they really never get too thick except for selected areas where there are line weights. When we're speaking about adding the line weight, we really tend to do it in a very subtle way. Generally speaking, you'll have some line weights around the hair area, typically for the head overlapping the neck, and any other areas that really need some key differentiation so that there isn't confusion amongst the lines about what is in front and what is behind. So you'll see a few areas here where I've thickened the lines on his coat, of his shirt overlapping his pants, as well as the edge of his jacket, his cuff here, overlapping the bag strap and the jacket as well. And the most common location really is the hair as well as the head overlapping. Now keep in mind you want to have restraint with line weighting in a general sense when we're talking about manga styles. It's very typical for the line weighting to not really be exaggerated or too thick. Some styles, of course, do have very thick lines featuring, and of course, that's up to you. But in a general sense, the trend is to have very thin lines, and also when you do work quite thinly, it's easier to draw some lines slowly, even if they are a little jagged, and they'll still look cool from the normal viewing distance. They'll still look very smooth and very professional. You can see when I zoom in here, you can see that not all the lines are necessarily perfect, but in reality, nobody is going to be looking that hard and that close at the particular image, right? From the normal viewing distance, which is the 100% size over here, everything looks pretty clean. Now, something called hook shading is used quite liberally. In fact, it's used even more than I've used it in this particular piece. And what is hook shading, you may ask? Hook shading is a technique where we emphasize the underlapping line, almost hinting at a type of shadow that is occurring from the overlapping line. And so what you can see here in the neck areas, we have the necklines here that are being overlapped by the head. However, at the top of the line, we have a triangular type of shape that fades into the thinness of the line. Once again, another hook shadow here. In a sense, they're a type of occlusion shadow. Of course, that is related to lighting, and I would definitely encourage you to research it. But in effect, they are a type of occlusion shadow. They hint that a small shadow is being cast over that area and making it darker. And when you start looking for hook shading, you start seeing it everywhere. Many manga styles use a lot of hook shading. It's a very effective way to differentiate between objects and also help show what is in front and what is behind, like normal line weighting. So try and use hook shading when you're testing your own versions of these styles, and really consider it a very useful technique. You can see hook shading has been used in multiple locations throughout this piece. Thicker outer lines are sometimes used to really emphasize the outer contours of the shapes, and in that instance, often thinner inner lines are used for inner details. Typically, you don't want to outline your entire work with a thick outline. That's not necessarily against any particular rule, it's just that it does tend to make the entire piece seem somewhat like a sticker. Finally, a technique called line softening is often used to soften very sharp and hard-edged lines. And this is done over the entire piece to create a very smooth look to the work. And we'll be taking a look at line softening in the next lesson. In summary, we want to make note of the following. First off, that we want to use thin lines. In fact, very thin lines if possible. As thin as you need to go before the line can't be seen. So just draw the lines as thinly as possible and allow yourself the freedom to thicken them up as needed with your line weighting. The second thing is that when you are doing line weighting, it's very subtle. The line weighting is typically only done on areas that absolutely need it to help differentiate whether something is in front or behind. If it is otherwise clear, then there's no need to add the line weight there. Thirdly, we use hook shading quite a lot when we're doing manga styled work in a general sense. That's not a hard and fast rule, but a lot of manga styles really use hook shading. And last but not least, we want to avoid thick outer lines, because this can make our work look very flat and take away a lot of the three-dimensionality that we're going for. These are the core things we want to remember about how we approach line weighting when we're dealing with manga and anime styled work. I'll see you in the next lesson to learn about line softening.